live. Okay.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Mike Sears, and from Sears Wealth Management and Insurance Solutions, and we're delighted to be with each of you today in our Facebook Live, or our 30-minute Thursdays. And I have joining with me Seth Morris, who is one of the advisors in our office. And we're delighted to be with each of you on another 30-minute Thursday. So thank you for joining with us. Seth, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, Mike. I'm glad to be here. As always, I'd like to welcome everybody out who's watching as well. And again, remind you that if you'd like, please use the chat feature on your screen, on your phone or your computer. Ask us questions, comment. We'll try to get to any questions that we can, but it just helps us see who's on and helps us feel not so alone.
And also don't forget that at the end of the broadcast, we'll have a raffle, and there'll be a lucky winner. So if you stay with us to the end, you'll get to see if your name is called. And so that'll be exciting as well. So,
Mike, I was looking at today's topic, and I'm pretty excited about this one. We've talked about a lot of things in the past, annuities, long-term care, health insurance, or life insurance. And I think this topic really encompasses all of those things. Is that right?
Yep, it sure does.
Mm-hmm. So today we're going to talk about what is a financial plan. And it really, all those pieces that we talked about in the past, they may be kind of out of order, but, like I mentioned, we look at all of those things in someone's financial plan. And so, Mike, what are the basics of a financial plan, I guess?
Well, I think we use an analogy in our office a lot that maybe will be helpful to you. And so maybe I can ask it in this way. Can you imagine one day you're sitting at your kitchen table and you get this idea, you know what, it would be really exciting to build a new house, Seth. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think we all have that idea. We don't want to buy a used one. Let's build one from scratch, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, so my question, Seth, let me ask you this question. So if you were building a brand new house, would you build that house without a set of blueprints?
Probably not. I wouldn't try it.
Why not?
I wouldn't know where to start. I'm not a builder. I've never done that before.
So what you're telling me is you wouldn't, sketch out this house that you want to build and then load up your truck, go over to Home Depot, get a bunch of boards and a hammer and some nails, and start hammering away and building that house.
No, I wouldn't. I think even as a kid, when we would decide we were going to build a fort somewhere, we would have a pretty detailed plan as to how that was going to look.
Well, so those of you who are on this call, obviously we're having some fun here. I've asked that question many, many times. Would you ever build a house without a set of financial blueprints? And everyone's told me, no way. And so instead, what would you do? You get this idea. Obviously, you used to have some kind of a vision about what it is that you want to build. And you finally go off to an architect and you sit down. And all of a sudden, you realize you're in good hands. Why? Because that architect begins asking you many, many questions. He asks questions like, well, what kind of house do you want to build? Do you want to build a 2-story house, a 1-story ranch? Are we building a mansion here? And then he starts asking details. I know my wife would ask, how big is the kitchen? How big is the family room? What would the decor look like? What would the landscape look like in the backyard? And probably hundreds of details would be hammered out over the next 2 or 3 weeks, or maybe even months. And when we finish that process, all of a sudden we get a knock on the door, and we get the UPS guy, and he comes with a big box, Seth. And what do you think is in that box?
The blueprints, right?
Yeah, the blueprints. It's amazing. So you go ahead and you hire a contractor, and the building begins. And on a regular basis, you go to the construction site, and as the building starts to progress, you start to realize, you know what? This house is more beautiful, Seth, than we could ever imagine. And as they start to get to the completion stage, you just shake your head in amazement how wonderful this house really is. And you realize the reason this has happened is because you took the time in advance to meet with a professional who knew exactly how to design this house based on your input. And there you have it. And now you're living in your dream house.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the question is, what in the world does this have to do with a financial plan?
Yeah, no, I mean, we're not, talking about where the kitchen sink goes or how big mom's bathroom should be. But when we're looking at someone's financial life, why is it so important to have a set of plans or, this roadmap going forward?
Well, I think, I mean, there's lots of people, Seth, who in retirement, do this on their own. But I must say, over the last 32 years that we've been working with clients, I keep waiting for someone to come into our office with this set of financial blueprints or this financial plan from their advisor. And sadly enough, for those of you who are on this call, it just does not happen very often. And so most people, Seth, when they come into the office, they come in with a folder or a folders or a box, and it has all of their statements, and they realize that they have money. But what else? What do you think's missing from that?
Some kind of a plan for that money?
Yeah, I would say really that most people, and I don't know if those of you who are on this call, if you don't have a financial plan, the question usually arises, what does this all mean? I know I have money saved, I know I have investments, but I really don't know what it means. And a financial plan is the centerpiece of all good financial planning. And like the architect who's helping someone to build a house, the financial advisor actually becomes the financial architect. And he begins by asking many, many, many questions. What are the big concerns that you have currently? What are the goals for the future? And we start to get an idea of what's important to the client. In fact, I think I want to bring up a graphic that shows the process, a very simple process that can be used in the financial planning process. Would that be okay if we did that? So let's see if I can put that together here. Give me a second here as we put this together. All right, good. So you're seeing this. We call this our roadmap process. It's a 3-step process. And so before we can create this financial plan or this financial set of blueprints, it begins with a comprehensive financial assessment. And this is where a lot of all of the upfront work takes place, because it's in the assessment that we begin to understand where are we at currently. Hard to go forward if we don't know where we're at. Another way of saying this is, what is working currently in your financial life and what is not currently working in your financial life? So if you look at the box on the left, it says we have this comprehensive financial assessment. We identify and analyze all investment decisions. And I might want to say all previous investment decisions. Why did you invest the money the way that you did? We want to know that. Where are the current assets? We collect and review all current statements. We want to pinpoint or identify if there have been any lost opportunities in the past or any income gaps in the past. We don't want to repeat those in the future. And then, of course, we want to unpack all the taxes. We want to unpack the goals for retirement. We want to understand each investment individually, because every investment should have a purpose. And of course, you cannot talk about analyzing investment without talking about risk. All of that is done in this comprehensive financial assessment, which is usually about a 3-week process, sometimes a month, as we analyze where we're at currently. Because what are we building towards? If we're talking about a financial plan, this roadmap is designed to get us to create that financial plan. And it's in the financial implementation meeting, the second box, where we're now starting to formulate ideas for what this financial plan should look like. We're going to make decisions and set goals. We're going to create recommendations and milestones. We're going to produce timelines and income adjustments. And we're getting everything ready so that we can initiate this plan and get it approved so that we can actually execute it, which is actually what the third box is. This is what we call plan execution and monitoring, where then when we finally have analyzed everything, we understand what the investment should be, because as we're going to talk about again, that every investment should have a specific purpose. Then we start talking about fund transfers and confirmation of those transfers. We do an audit of those transfers. We do comprehensive checkpoints to benchmark our progress. I think that's really, Seth, one of the beautiful parts about a financial plan is that we can actually benchmark our progress. That's another way of saying we know what the starting point is in this financial plan and where we plan to be in the future, and we can benchmark our progress year by year. And then, of course, we have ongoing monitoring and updates along the way.
Yeah, no, I think we monitor a lot more than annually. Just looking at this process here, obviously I'm very familiar with it. I think what's really key is the comprehensive financial assessment. I think a lot of people kind of bypass that step. But if you think about other things in life, for instance, I took my car to a mechanic the other day and I said, tell me what's wrong with it. And he didn't say, well, Seth, you need a new motor. He said, let us diagnose it and we'll go through it and we'll tell you what's working and what's not working. And I appreciate that. And so I think when people sit down to look at their financial lives or start a plan, that is a key ingredient element of it. You need to look at where you're at now before you can move forward into the future.
I think that's right. And of course, this process follows a very logical process. Where are we today? What plans do we need to create and implement? And then we execute those plans. And I think we do that in almost most areas of our life. And that's the process that we use, and it works very, very well.
Mm-hmm. So, Mike, there's, probably an endless list of things that we can plan for in someone's financial life. But I think today we wanted to address some of the key areas that we assess and we plan for in a financial plan. And the first one of those is income. Now, Mike, why is income so important when we're talking about a financial plan?
Well, obviously, when it comes, think about it. When in our working years, what are we looking forward to every 2 weeks, Seth?
Paycheck, hopefully.
Yeah, a paycheck. We work hard during that 2 week period of time or that week period of time, and we're looking forward to that paycheck. And not only are we looking forward to it, we're counting on it. It's got to be there week in and week out, or we can't pay our bills, right? Well, when we retire, that is the first thing that everyone is concerned about. Where is my paycheck? And am I going to have reliable, consistent income during my retirement years? And is there a certain amount of money that I know is going to happen every single month that I can count on to pay my bills? And so the first key ingredient of a financial plan is identifying what are the income needs of that family. And Seth, what's the tool we use to identify what the monthly income needs are for that family?
Well, we give them a budget sheet usually. People kind of get a kick out of that we're asking them to go fill out a budget sheet, but it really is helpful. And a lot of people don't know where they're spending their money. And if you don't know what you're spending your money on or where you're spending it, you don't know what income to plan for. And so I think the budget sheet is key in figuring out, how much income do we need, day in, day out for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, and we build reserves into that budget as well. And we take into account, and we really pretty much ask you to go back over the last couple of months to find out where you're spending your money, to find out where the holes are, if there are any, or if there's some excessive area. that maybe could be problematic in retirement, because we do know during your working years, we need to live within our means. And when we retire, we need to live within our means. And so having an understanding of what we're spending, month in and month out is a key ingredient to this income equation.
Mm-hmm. And Mike, what are some of the, I mean, when we're working, we're getting paychecks from our employer. What are some of the income sources that we see for people in retirement?
Well, I think one key area that we see often for most people is Social Security is a main part. And of course, the question that most people have is, should I take it early or should I take it late? What about my spouse? What kind of Social Security will he or she receive? And of course, a big question as far as Social Security is concerned, like in our family, Julie took care of children all those years, Seth, and I was a major breadwinner. And so a lot of people think, well, I guess the only Social Security you're going to get is the breadwinner's Social Security. Well, not so. There's Social Security that I earned based on my record, and then Julie, who worked harder than I did at home, gets a spousal benefit for Social Security. It's almost one half of mine, so combined together is pretty great. So we want to plan for Social Security. That's one key part of the income. Another key income, it could be that your employer, in addition to having a 401k plan or a retirement plan, he also had a pension plan where you're guaranteed monthly income for your life, and if you're married, for the life of your spouse. And that's a very key, that's a very reliable source of income if the employer can keep the promise made on a guaranteed basis. So that's another source. Sometimes we may have someone who has rents and a rental property, especially if their property is paid off. There could be a sufficient amount of income that would be helpful to the family from rental income. Of course, if you're retired and you've got a rental property and you have quite a large amount of debt on it, probably the rents will just cover the debt service and the expenses. But assuming that your rental property is paid off, that can be another good source of income. Another big source of income or supplemental income would be required minimum distributions from your retirement accounts. Those of you who are on this call, if you retire at 65, you're not required to take money out of your retirement accounts. But at age 72, the required minimum distribution by law says you must take a required minimum distribution or pay a 50% penalty. So most people will take the required minimum distribution, Seth. So we see that as well. There are other people that will just simply take, they'll have a variety of different investment tools that they'll have that can create income, and they'll take systematic withdrawals from those assets. And of course, you can recreate your own private pension plan as well. Some people, they like this idea of some guarantees, and they might use annuities to help create lifetime income. That we've seen that before, Seth, I think. That's been helpful for people to create reliable, consistent income, and we transfer the risk to the insurance carrier. So that's another place. That's a lot of places that we see so far.
Yeah, no. So there's seems like when hopefully when you retire and you stop trading your time for a paycheck, you have more than just one source of income. We're looking for as many reliable sources of income as we can get our hands on.
Yeah.
And I think, that goes perfectly into the next step of things is, investments is a key area that we plan for when we create a financial plan. And, when we're working, it's kind of, I've heard you say this a lot, Mike, it's pedal to the metal. Let's grow that money. But obviously now in retirement, we need to start thinking about income and the next 20 to 30 years of our life. So how does that look, Mike, when someone does is transitioning from their working years to their retirement years, and what happens with their investments or should happen in that time?
Well, I think the first piece to that is we need to do a reassessment of risk. I think I shared this in the past. I remember a client of mine who in 2008 had invested very aggressively. He was in his 50s. And I asked him, what did he do when the market was down like 50%? And he said, I didn't do anything. And I said, well, how much money the value of your retirement accounts reduced? And he says, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? I mean, it was the worst time period in history almost. You don't know? And he said, no, I never looked. And I said, well, why didn't you look? And he said, because I didn't need to. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, I had good income. I had a steady paycheck. Now, obviously, in the future, that could have affected me in the future. But during this period of time in my life, that reduction in value in my retirement account did not affect me or my family at that moment. Well, fast forward that 15 years. Now you're retired. And now that could have a tremendous effect on your future, right? I mean, I think that's what you're talking about. It's a different situation when you're retired and you're counting on that money to sustain you for not just 5 years or 10 years, but for most of us at age 65, there's a 50% chance that a couple age 65, one of them will live into their 90s. That's a long time to create income. So that was a long answer, and but what I'm trying to the point that I'm trying to make is that a reassessment of risk at retirement may very well be much different than it was for most people. And I say for most people, not everybody, but for most people than what it was like when you were working. So we've got to make certain that that money lasts. Our personal philosophy is make a little bit and don't blow it up, right? I mean, that's a good philosophy. And we can't, we have to make some returns on because we're going to live a long time, but we need to probably reassess the risk, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I think another, big thing with investments in, financial planning is that every investment has a purpose. People will come in their, younger years and they just have these investments that they thought were a good idea, but they didn't really have a purpose for them or a plan for them. And, if you don't have a purpose for your investment, it's easy to find yourself not in the right spot or where you want to be. So having a financial plan and working off of income and then investing to that plan, I think is really critical. And then the next thing that we usually address is taxes. We're not trying to maximize our taxes, though. We're trying to keep those down as much as possible. Right, Mike?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, take a look at what's happening in the economy today. And with all the money that's being printed today, that seems to be our new solution. If we're short, we just print more money. Well, and of course, there have been those that have been talking about inflation as being transitory. Well, go to the gas pump and go to the grocery store, right, Seth? Mm-hmm. And I don't think that inflation is transitory. I think it may very well be here to stay and for increases, which tells us that, and just kind of going back, by the way, to your other point about investments, of every investment having a purpose, some of the investments will be geared specifically to generating income, right? Have to. Some of the other investments will be for inflation purposes. There needs to be a little bit more growth there. Some of those assets need to be designed for a safety net. That if the growth assets or there's a major problem in the economy, we have to have a fallback position if we can create it. And so that's another piece. And then, of course, another important part is liquidity. We have to make certain that we've got enough liquid assets so that when things happen, you need a new car, the transmission goes, the roof is leaking, the air conditioner goes out, that we have the ability to get the cash. So every asset should have a specific purpose. And of course, as you were saying, we've got to address the taxes.
Mm-hmm. I think with taxes, we talked about this in a previous 30-Minute Thursday. Most of the money in this country is in tax-deferred vehicles. And so when someone enters retirement, a lot of the time, their biggest asset, usually whenever they dip into that, they pay taxes. And so we are constantly planning for that and assessing the tax, penalties for anything that we do or anything we take in income. And I've yet to meet the person that says, I love paying taxes. It's my civic duty. So Mike, what ways can we, reduce our taxes?
So we could put together, 3 boxes here if I could. Can you see those okay?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, assets can fall into one of three categories. We have taxable assets. As you were saying, most of the money is in tax deferred accounts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Last box is tax free. And of course, if we had a choice, where would most people want to be? Taxable, tax deferred, or tax free? I mean, what do you think?
Tax free.
Okay, so we would like to, if we could, we'd like to move to the right as best we could, as fast as we could. And in some cases, we can't do it. But, the taxable assets are, anything, bank savings account, whether you spend the money or not, Seth, you get a 1099. If you have a mutual fund that pays dividends and you're not spending it, you get a 1099 for the dividends, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or possibly capital gain taxes, right? Capital gains. The tax deferred assets is where most of the money is in the United States. It's all in retirement accounts, most of it. And so the tax deferred accounts are, you got a little tax break up front, putting money into your retirement accounts. And what you have here is a nest egg of 100% taxable income as you take the money out. Well, for those of you who are on the call, I mean, what do you think is happening as far as taxes? Do you think they're going up? Or do you think they're going down? If you think they're going up, well, as you pull money out of your tax deferred accounts, which is, for most of us, it's IRA type accounts, you're going to pay taxes and possibly more taxes on that money stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the challenge with tax free is that there isn't a lot that's in the tax free bucket, right? And so anytime you hear the word Roth, we've spoken about this before, Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, are if you follow certain rules, which I don't have time to talk about today, this could potentially be tax-free. And so what we're having here is, instead of having a taxable distribution out of here, we're talking about having a tax-free distribution for life, and assuming the government would continue to allow that, because we've already paid tax on most of that money. So from a tax point of view, is it possible to get some of our tax deferred assets into the tax-free bucket? And the answer is yes. There are conversions that we can do, and the cost of moving that money to the right really is the transfer tax on pulling money out of tax deferred and paying taxes at today's tax rates, with the thought that if we do it sooner than later, that future taxes would be higher if it all came out of here than paying the taxes on the distribution. And usually that cannot happen in 1 or 2 years. It's usually over a schedule. It could be 4 or 5 years. It all depends on how much money is in there. But taxes are a big deal. And maybe in another meeting, we'll just talk about what's on the table here tax-wise. But everything I see tells me that taxes are on the rise because of the way we're spending money.
Mm-hmm, definitely looks that way, Mike. And I know we're closing in on time here. We've barely scratched the surface as to all the things that we need to consider or plan for in a financial plan. But just to touch on the last, two really main areas that we focus on is, one is healthcare, right? We know that there's going to be a lot of healthcare needs, now and in retirement. People are living longer. Healthcare is getting more expensive. There are ways that we do plan for that for every plan, right, Mike?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. And long-term care is one of those things we look at. We look at Medicare and all of those parts. The last thing that we usually plan for is legacy planning. And Mike, maybe briefly, just before we close, what is legacy planning?
Well, it's really saying is, I've worked my entire life and I have people that I love, and I would like to, if I could, transfer my assets to my loved ones in an orderly way, with the least amount of taxes and the least amount of hassles that I possibly can, which usually says to us, do we have proper wills, trusts, power of attorney financially, power of attorney for healthcare? Are all of our beneficiary designations, are they current and are they up to date? And does my trust say what I want it to say as far as the transfer of those assets to my loved ones? And a lot of times things change. Sometimes there's a divorce, sometimes there's a death. Things change in our planning, but we've never changed, Seth, the documents. And so that's something to consider. Well, I think we are out of time for here. Let me just say to you that the winner of the raffle is Sheila S. Sheila, congratulations to you. Our team will be in contact with you. You won a box of Krispy Kreme donuts, and Lisa will reach out to you to ask if you would like original glazed or assorted. So that's exciting. Our next 30-minute Thursday is August 19th. The topic will be estate planning with a guest speaker, Chase Morris, who's an attorney that is very well qualified to speak on this subject. So signing off from Rancho Cucamonga. Sorry, this seemed to be so short today. There's so much more to talk about. Bless you all and all the good things that you do. Stay safe, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks, August 19th. Thank you.